Hey friends, in today's video, I'm going to share with you how the 2 steps of listening to your employees and identifying the skill and will on your team can take your leadership from good to great. Hey friend, good to see you. How's your morning kicking off? Nice. Mine is going well. I started the day with a little reading, and as I was reading, I was reminded of a concept. Have you ever heard of the concept of situational leadership? Simply put, it's a leadership model that helps us be able to categorize our teammates into skill and will categories. And the idea behind it, if you can identify folks by their different varying levels of skill and will, it helps you as a leader know where to invest your time. And as a leader, I'm sure you probably realize that it's really important for you to decide where you're going to be spending your time. And as I thought, as this like model came to my mind as I was reading this morning, it reminded me of a story actually, where maybe I can help illustrate the model a little bit more. It starts with Carol Joyce, actually. You've heard me talk about Carol Joyce in the past, and I'll continue to bring her in because she was a pivotal leader in my life that had many great pieces of advice or wisdom that she shared with me that helped me be successful as I transitioned specifically into leadership. And a little bit of background, I spent 16 years working for the fifth largest bank in America. And by the way, just a quick plug, if you're finding my stories interesting so far and you're finding value in the way that I tell stories to help drive forward concepts, I invite you in to subscribe to this channel and continue to follow me on the journey, as I'll share many of the lessons that I learned over this 16-year-long career in banking. In this particular example, I had been in banking for about 6 years, and I had been promoted to a position where I covered a territory that covered a 60-mile radius, where I had 5 different branches that I covered. And my task was to drive the revenue channel in our business banking segment. What that meant is we needed to make sure that we were identifying businesses that didn't bank with us and figure out what would it take to recruit them over to the bank. And as I stepped into that role, I had kind of 2 choices. I could decide, would I personally go out to each of these different cities where each of these 5 branches existed and go out and try to develop business myself? Or would I figure out how to engage the local team so that I could help duplicate my efforts in each of these cities and just kind of manage the process versus going out and marching the streets on my own? And because I've always been a person who loves engaging people and inviting them into the process, I definitely chose that as my option. But as I got into this position, it was my first time covering such a broad territory, and I wasn't exactly sure what to do. Thankfully for me, my mentor, Carol Joyce, had also been promoted not long ago at this point in time to a role where she was managing positions just like mine in a different city. So I called her up and she said, "You know what, buddy? Here's what I recommend. I recommend you looking up the situational leadership model, identifying which of your branch managers fall into which category, and figure out where you should be spending the bulk of your time." Well, in order for me to identify where folks were at from a situational leadership model perspective, I needed to go spend time with them. And before I talk about spending time with them, let me just tell you the 4 different categories within the situational leadership model. There's high skill, high will. These are your folks within the group who are super excited about what they're doing, and they have a high acumen in whatever the category that you're trying to get them to work hard in. Then you have the low skill but high will. These are folks that are probably typically a little bit newer to either the concept or the position, but they are excited to be there, and you want to make sure that you quickly get them engaged and skillful in whatever that is so that they can continue to feel like they're winning. And then you have the high skill but low will. These are folks that for some reason have become emotionally disengaged, and that it's going to take a little bit of work to figure out what's causing them to not engage in this thing that they clearly have a lot of skill in. And then finally, low skill, low will. Today I'm not going to talk a lot about low will, low skill, because it's my belief system that at some point when somebody is actively disengaged at work, there's an ownership that they also need to take. And if you haven't seen my video about quiet quitting, I recommend going and watching that video, because it talks about the employment contract. And when you are an employee of an organization, it is your responsibility to find the willingness to engage. And if you have no will at all and you lack skill, it's important that you figure out for yourself how you can figure out which category that or which aspect of the skill will that you want to work with first, so that you can be engaged in your role. But for today, I'm going to put that aside and not talk about that much. So in order for you to identify the skill and will of people within the organization, this might seem simple to some, but it's worth saying you got to spend time with them. In fact, I'll back up to, I've mentioned in other videos, I also spent 8 years as a Pentecostal preacher from ages 18 to 26. And during that time, I was being groomed to become a pastor. And my pastor had pulled me aside and he said, he was from the South and he was a simple man. He said, brother, if you ever go and take over a church and they have a chair sitting in the middle of the aisle that don't make no sense to you, brother, you better not touch that chair until you understand the people's relationship with that chair. And it's such a simple example that is really profound if you pay attention. See, if you're, and we see this often, and no offense if you're a young leader, but we often see this in young leaders where they come in and they think their responsibility is to start changing things right away. Well, if you come in and you start changing things right away and you don't understand people's relationship to the things that you're changing, that's a quick way to create disengagement. In fact, I have a quick equation for you that could be really helpful in scenarios in the future. And that is R plus R minus R equals R plus R. That is rules plus regulations minus relationship equals resentment and rebellion. In other words, if you come in swinging and changing everything and pumping your chest and asserting your authority, my friend, if you see people not fully engaging in what it is that you're trying to accomplish, it's because you forgot the equation. You need to start with the relationship. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So as I listened to Carol Joyce, I went and I decided to sit down with all of my branch managers and just learn about who they are and what matters to them in the world. And as I sat down with them, and it wasn't just one occasion, I never came out the first or second time and just jumped into business. I came out with the intention of building a relationship. And so as I came out and built a relationship with folks, naturally, what ended up becoming clear is I had 3 different branch managers that fell into different skill will categories. And for the sake of confidentiality, I'm not going to share their names, but I'll call them branch manager A, B, and C. Branch manager A was in a city where, this person had been in their position for a few years and was one of the top producing branch managers and most engaged folks and really understood business. Probably had an equivalent acumen to me at that time. And when I went out to their branch was engaged, their team was engaged, and this branch manager was excited about getting out and talking to businesses and had already been doing it with success. And when I went out, I was welcomed with open arms and with a big personality and someone that when you look in their eyes, you knew they were happy to be there. And when you look at their results, you could see they were already engaged with this. With someone like this, you just want to make sure that you spend time with them, and that you genuinely show appreciation for their process, and you make sure that you understand what is working for them. Because when you can understand how and why people are engaged in a process and what gets them excited, it's going to help you when you start working with these other categories of skill will, how you can help those people. And with these folks, you don't have to spend a ton of time with them. When you have someone who has high skill, high will, it just is you continuing to communicate, like, what are the needs, what are our goals, and like how can you continue to engage this person and help them and remove their barriers to help them achieve their goals. And then save this person as you continue to build their relationship, because they're also the person that you want to pair up your high will, low skill people, because you want those people partnering with your very engaged employees, because it's like people become like the people that they spend the most time with. So obviously, iron sharpeneth iron. When you get your high will people engaged with other high will people who are also high skill, they do kind of a natural training process for you. And it's not a manager being lazy. Human species, we learn through mimicry. We learn through watching other people. And it's so much more helpful for them to watch someone who's actually doing the job than the manager needing to be the expert on everything, because you haven't done the job in a while. It's not up to you necessarily to tell people what to be doing all the time. Your job is to make sure they're surrounded by all of the tools and resources that they need to really engage in it. So this branch manager was engaged. It was just about spending a little time with them, and making sure that I understand what was going well, what was important to them, and continue to like show up in ways that were important to them. Then I move into branch manager B. This person was a newer branch manager who had a high will. They were pumped about their new role. They were excited to be there. They were willing to run towards everything. But when we looked at their approach towards business, they didn't quite know what to do. And it showed in their results, and it showed in like when we did some practicing on like getting in front of business owners, they didn't quite know what to do. This is the place where you should be spending the bulk of your time, because people who have a high willingness and are low skill, they're at a critical point in your organization, in your team, in your group, whatever you're doing. And the reason why is because it's human nature to want to achieve mastery. We want the gold star. We want to feel good. It's literally in your DNA that when you are celebrated in a way that is meaningful to you through actually accomplishing something, not through superficial praise. It's not helpful when someone is giving you like that attaboy or attagirl, and you know you didn't really do something significant. But when you have actually learned to do something and you've achieved it to the point of mastery, we feel amazing. And so it's so important that you know that about humans, and that when you see a high willingness, that you do whatever you can do to like help engage this employee to get them to a skillful place. So with this employee, I spent the most time with them, and I made sure that I partnered them frequently with the branch manager who was really engaged and who was popping. They went on business calls together. They practiced doing outreach to businesses. When we got a new business in, we had this branch manager sit with the other branch manager to watch how they have a conversation with this customer to uncover all of the needs. And then of course, like naturally, this person started picking up on their skill set. But then we would also have coaching sessions where we would sit down on a weekly or bi-weekly basis with this high will, right, low skill employee, and listen to what is working and what is not, and just figure out how can we send them on a learning journey that fits within their style. Some employees need to engage with other people. When you listen to how people are learning, some people just need to engage in their resources, and they just need you to ask them the right questions to help guide them towards thinking critically and empowering their potential. I'm going to warn you right now, a tendency that I see a lot in managers is we want to jump in and just tell employees what to do. Do what I did. I was successful in that position. Just do this. Do exactly what I did. The problem when you do that is you're now just creating a bunch of mini-me's. And people have a different approach than you. Everyone has a slightly different approach to how they're going to see success in a position. I'm a person who's high strategy. I need to have a thoughtful plan before I step into anything. And when I don't know how to do something, I'm going to go to YouTube, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to do a lot of behind the scenes work before I start talking to other people. This specific employee was high relationship building. They needed to talk to other people. And so it was my role to make sure I knew who were the people that were being successful in this position that I could tell them to connect with so they could naturally learn and trust their learning style for them, not jump in and tell them exactly what to do. So we got them around the right people. We made sure we had regular coachings, and eventually this person really started killing it in the business banking realm. The last category was an employee that was high skill but low will. When I first showed up to meet with this employee C, as I was just sitting down to catch up with them, they were typing away on their computer and didn't even look at me. And I was like, oof, cold shoulder, what is going on? Later, I found out that this person had applied for the position that I was in, and they were a little bitter about the fact that I got it over them. And I didn't know that. I didn't know what was going on with their emotional state, but I knew this. When you see someone who is not emotionally engaging with you, they're not looking at you, you feel awkward around them, a tendency for an immature manager is to use your authority to get them to understand your expectations. Ugh. I hate that word. Expectations. Friend, nobody cares what your expectations are. You're not their mom. And honestly, I love you, Mom, but I hate that word so bad because it's important for you to remember removing all titles and positions. Before you are anything, you are a human talking to another human. When you say my expectations, you're asserting your authority over someone else. And this is where we get lost in leadership. Leadership is not asserting authority and trying to force someone to do everything by talking about my expectations. When you see someone who's disengaged, your heart should open up and think, what can I do to get them engaged? How can I, think critically in this moment from a place of pronoia versus paranoia. If I was a paranoid person in this moment where this person is disengaged, I can be like, well, it's their job. They signed the employment contract, and now I need to just crack the whip and make sure that they get engaged. Otherwise, they're going to be put on a performance improvement plan, and we're just going to get rid of them. That's a waste of an employee, and that's poor leadership. As a leader, when you see someone like this, it's important to engage them emotionally. So I never stopped showing up with this manager, but I also didn't talk about business. You know what I did instead? This was, by the way, not my idea. After talking to my mentor, Carol Joyce, I decided that my approach would be I would send out a weekly email where I would highlight branch manager A and B and talk about the success that they were seeing. And as we started seeing success with them, and they really started producing from a revenue perspective within this category of business banking, and then I continued to highlight kind of what it is that we were working on together. And then I would just show up to this other branch manager C's branch, and I would ask if they would go to lunch with me, and I would see how their wife was doing or how their kids were doing, and talk about what they're interested in. And eventually that person opened up to me, and they apologized for being disengaged. They told me that they were a little bit bitter, but eventually they saw that I was the right person to be in the role. And when they saw everyone else being successful, and I was able to engage the emotional self, engage the heart of a human, because you are a human, then they invited me into their branch, and that person ended up becoming my top performing branch manager. So as I kind of tie this all together for you, I hope you're seeing that as a leader, it's very valuable for you to sit down, listen to your people, learn who they are, learn what matters. You have so much pressure, especially within corporations. we want to hit goals. We all have objectives and goals that we want to hit, and we want to get there as fast as possible. And look, I get it. I've been in that environment, and I know the pressure that is on leaders to get the goals accomplished. And often above you, you have folks who come from an archaic form of leadership who are applying a lot of pressure because they themselves don't know this beautiful secret that I'm sharing with you. If you'll listen, you got to listen to other people. You have to understand what is important to them. You have to learn what stage are they at. Are they high skill, high will? My friend, just keep that plate spinning. Keep them engaged. Show them love. Figure out how you can help. If it's low skill and high will, pair them up with the high skill, high will people. Surround them with other folks who know what they're doing. Coach them on a regular basis to figure out what's getting in their way, and focus on the things that they're doing well. If people are feeling good about what they're doing, and you're constantly praising good behaviors, they're going to continue to behave in ways that keep them engaged. And then finally, with these folks who are high skill, low will, who are disengaged, make sure you take time to understand why, right? Don't spend all your time trying to assert your authority and hold them accountable, because that's not going to work. Eventually, you'll just cause that employee to quit, which you might be thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I want. If that's what you're thinking, you, don't be offended, might be being a lazy manager. Lazy managers just want to move past the disengaged employee and not spend time understanding. You could really spend time to understand, especially if they have a valuable skill set. And then finally, I know I said I wasn't going to talk about this much, but with the folks who are low will, low skill, here's what will naturally happen when you start engaging these other three categories. Naturally, as those folks start seeing what other people are doing well, they're gonna, if they want to be engaged, they're gonna start reaching out to you and ask, how can I do that as well? Or they're gonna start reaching out to those other employees, and you're gonna hear those stories if you're talking to your employees. So make sure that you're talking to your employees, and you'll see if these low skill, low will people are starting to engage. And if they don't in any way, these are the folks that we know just might not be right for the role. And look, that's just true sometimes. Sometimes people have been so burnt in their roles that they're bitter and they have their heels in and they're not going to move. And at that point, it's like, don't spend all your time trying to get the disengaged people engaged. And we see this all the time in leadership. We're like, okay, we ignore the people who are engaged doing the job because they don't need my attention. You're wrong. They need the most of your attention, because when other managers from other organizations see their engagement, but then they see the life leaving their eyes because they're not getting attention from their leader, those people are going to be poached from your team. If you're spending all your time with these disengaged, low skill, low will people, you're missing something important. So let's find a way to engage the heart of our employees and make sure that we listen to them. We don't change things too quickly. We figure out what is the skill and will that they're at today. We pair them up with the right people. We provide them with coaching. And I think you'll be really happy to see the engagement from your team. All right, I got to wrap up. It was great seeing you today. Hey, remember, advice is like eating fish. You gotta pick out the bones. Have a good day.